hotel, do you see the road? I'm out to my soul into the size whenever the smoke clear out of my face and my picture perfect. You do it. All of that green together, the truth, yeah. When I tell you the
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to Cypherfics. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the second part of, What If Hazbinhotel Meets Binding of Isaac. Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of Gamer95 on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. It had been 3 weeks, almost 4, since Isaac was admitted to the hospital, and things had been hectic for Verosika ever since. Although his physical health was perfect and 100% in the first week, he had not been discharged until week 3. The main reason, but not the only one, was that his abnormal recovery had caught the attention of the doctors, who wanted to study the situation further. There were 2 factors that prevented him from doing so, at least 100%. The first was that Verosika was completely opposed to treating the boy like a lab rat, as the boy had suffered enough. In fact, the hospital staff themselves agreed with her, and this is where the second reason why Isaac was still in the hospital, despite being recovered, comes in. His psychological state, which was still very delicate at best, as a result of the brutal and relentless torture he received, at the hands of his own mother, no less. So, it was not uncommon for him to have panic attacks, or for him to wake up screaming in the middle of the night, due to the nightmares he suffered, and spend long hours in a fetal position crying. And not in a normal way, but almost literally like rivers that flew non-stop from the eyes in such a way that an ordinary person would die of dehydration. Another of the many reasons why the doctors wanted to study Isaac. By the time this happened, there were only 2 ways to calm him down. Sedated him before he hurt himself, or Verosika comforted him until he calmed down, humming and cuddling to him, among other things that helped bring Isaac's mind back to a better place, and not where he had to relive nightmares and horrors. As a sample of the nightmares and horrors that are in the mind of the poor child, there were the enormous number of drawings that he had made. Although the quality of the drawing was crude, understandable given the artist's age, Isaac had a talent for expressing through barely legible illustrations and lettering what's inside his head. And when it was not pure nightmare fuel, then it was pure nausea fuel, and if it was neither of those 2, then it was tear-jerking, and if not, then it is all of the above that Isaac illustrates and describes, things that should not be in the head of a boy like him. Deformed beings, FTS, deformed FTS, BLD, objects buried in his own body and eyes, dismembered animals, nightmarish creatures, unknown horrors, excrement, BLD, pus, worrying mentions of suicide and hell in a constant and positive way, that and much more is what Isaac usually illustrates and describes when he is drawing in the basement, which is what he calls that personal hell that he had created. So horrifying that it's no wonder many hospital staff went out of their way not to see the poor boy's drawings, and thankful that he still doesn't have the talent to do more detailed work. What surprises him is the attitude that he usually has, when he does not suffer from panic attacks or nightmares. Despite all of this, Isaac still behaved in a sweet and charming way. Despite how broken he was, he still behaved like a little child, which made the whole situation even worse for both the hospital staff, Verosika, and Tex. It's not that he doesn't just draw horrible, nauseating and terrifying things, but when he's not drawing about the basement, he draws about things that have been more recent in his life, or more innocent things from his past. From his past would be his pets, a couple of cats named Tammy and Guppy, a couple of dogs named Max and Cricket, who seemed to be Isaac's company, as well as other strange creatures, such as baby-like creatures, insects of different shapes, mostly flies, and other different creatures. Most recently on this list would be the hospital staff, the hospital itself, and what Isaac can see from the window. But more importantly, and therefore the most repeated theme in Isaac's drawings, would be Verosika and Tex. The boy seemed to develop a rapid, intense and understandable affection for the pop star and her bodyguard, who already appear in many of his drawings, almost constantly, Verosika being more than Tex. But he also began to draw a third unknown character, a kind of angel with red wings and a halo, who fights against a huge obese and cruel creature who they would later discover is Isaac's mother. In Isaac's illustrations, this angel, who is apparently a woman, can be seen rescuing Isaac and delivering him into the arms of Verosika, who is often portrayed as an angel on various occasions as well. Verosika was incredibly touched by these drawings depicting her in such a light. It melted her heart that this sweet boy thought so highly of her. And it also made her more than a little anxious about revealing her true nature as a demonic succubus to him. Because he was a very religious little boy, and if he found out that his savior was a demon, well, she was scared he wouldn't like her anymore, that the bond they had been building over these past few weeks would just fade away into nothing. But she knew she couldn't hide it from him forever. He was going to have to find out at some point, and she knew it would be better to rip the band-aid off sooner than later. She was already making her plans to figure out what she was going to do to break it to him gently. She just hoped he wouldn't be too scared to come home with her. He was firmly in the belief that hell was a place of fire and brimstone and torture and fear. It was a shithole, that was for certain, but it was at least livable for the most part, and he'd be just fine there. Besides, despite everything, it was a shithole better than many others on Earth, like Hollywood Boulevard. Verosika still shuddered when she remembered the smell and misery of that place. The term sleeping on the stars lost all its appealing meaning when you see a homeless person doing that in the place. Even so, Verosika had been preparing everything to tell Isaac the truth, in such a way that he wouldn't give her a mental breakdown. She won't tell him that the place he's going to is hell. She'll keep that information hidden until he's mentally strong enough, and until he's lived there long enough that he doesn't have a heart attack or something similar. Verosika wasn't entirely sure whether or not a child can have a heart attack from stress, but she's not going to risk it and find out. So, for now, she would keep Isaac living in a half-lie. During these weeks, she prepared it, telling the little boy that the place where they were going to live was known as the underground, an unpleasant place with a terrible reputation for many, but if you are lucky enough, money, beauty and power, like Verosika, there's almost nothing to worry about. As long as you're careful, he listens to her, and does everything she says. She had already prepared the place where she was going to live, talking with her employees, both her work team and those from her home, about how to act when Isaac is there. Verosika had explained everything to them, in great detail, from beginning to end, from the torture and the boy's mental state, to his apparent powers. All so that under no circumstances, Isaac discovers that he is in hell, or exposes him to undue harassment. Although the vast majority agreed, there were some who were more resilient to this change. Most of these were not direct opposition, save for one, Josh. The incubi in question directly opposed bringing the child. Flashback. Verosika could see the faces of everyone in her group, and after telling them the entire story of Isaac, the expressions were either utter horror, unsweetened rage, or deep sadness depending on the person, but they were all deeply affected. No one had said anything yet, which was to be expected. And that's when Verosika dropped the biggest bombshell on them. And well, I've grown a bit fond of the kid, he's a true sweetheart, so that's why I've decided to bring him to live with me, she concluded happily. There was a moment of silence. Most of the group seemed intrigued by Verosika's decision, some of the members even seemed excited by it. But Josh looked at her as if he thought he'd lost his mind. Verosika, that's a terrible idea. Verosika's eye twitched. Do you have a problem, Josh? Huh? Do you have a problem with my life decisions? Josh rolled his eyes. Look, I can't tell you what to do, Lucifer knows I can't, but think for a second. You're taking the boy to hell, this place will literally eat him alive if he leaves you. I know, that's why I've planned how to keep him safe and protected from everything, until he is old enough to defend himself, she began to explain the popstar succubus. And that's why you and the others will have to behave, since until that moment arrives, he will be with me as long as possible. As I told you before, things will change around here for a while. Now if you'll excuse me, I'll go organize what's missing before your arrival, said Verosika, starting to leave the room. It would seem that this would be the end of the conversation, that this would be enough to convince the incubi, but for Josh it was not like that. Just when Verosika was in the doorway he spoke. Oh yeah? F it, don't think you can turn this into a nursery and tell us to behave, just because you took pity on a pathetic crippled kid. Bam! That was the sound of Verosika's hand hitting the door frame and part of the wall, and the most terrifying thing for everyone present was that her fingers were digging into the wall. As if it were made of butter, while much of it was cracked, those present could see long and numerous cracks extending throughout the wall. Verosika remained still for a few long seconds before turning a little to look at Josh, enough so that from her perspective, he saw half of her face and a single eye, who was terrified to see that gold and black eye of his boss, literally shining with his own light and pure fury, giving the incubi a look like the one an executioner would have, with an overwhelming aura of threat and terror, but also hate pure and contained. It permeated the place. "What did you just say?" Verosika said slowly and calmly, like the calm before the impending storm, as she watched several cracks stretched along the wall, from where she had buried her hand. His eyes still had that terrifying and sinister glow as he grabbed his employee by the collar of his shirt and held him at eye level. Everything had happened so quickly that those present barely caught Verosika's movement, they only saw a red blur. "Say that again, prick. I dare you. If dare you to talk SHT about Isaac one more DMN time." Josh responded by letting out a scream. That was all he could do as he was overwhelmed with terror. Verosika frowned and pushed him away. "Tchf pathetic," she nearly spat. "He's coming to live with me. Whether you like it or not. And if you do SHT to him, then that thing will be cooking on a stove." She pointed to Josh's groin area and he winced. Verosika frowned at him for a few more seconds before looking at the others. "Do any of the other bees have a problem with that?" The rest of her gang quickly denied any problem with little Isaac coming to live in hell. The succubus sneered. "That's what I thought." And with that, she turned and started to walk away from them, but not before stopping for a moment, seeing the damage she'd done to the wall. Verosika looked at her hand briefly, expecting to see her damaged skin and broken nails, but aside from her torn glove, there was only a little bit of dirt, but not even any pain, which made her raise an eyebrow in curiosity and surprise. Interesting, was the intrusive thought, but she didn't think much of it. She brushed the dirt off her hand, before looking back at her group, more specifically Josh. "And fix this DMN wall," she said before leaving the place. End of flashback. From that moment it was not difficult for the crew to commit to Verosika's order. When they were near Isaac, they would have to maintain a certain composure, but outside of the boy's presence they could continue doing whatever they wanted. In the end, Verosika allowed the hospital staff to run any tests she wanted on Isaac, as long as it wasn't intrusive, uncomfortable, or harmful to Isaac in the least, otherwise those tests would stop dead in their tracks. She allowed this so they wouldn't tell the police what happened to Isaac. This could be considered insane, but since her tormentor is dead, Verosika saw no reason to involve the authorities. Of course, the hospital staff simply didn't agree not to involve the authorities, so Verosika half lied, saying that she would carry out all legal processes with people she trusted. And although she was not going to involve the authorities, since the possibility of Isaac being taken from her is high, and she would never allow it, she in the end planned to hire the services of certain people to take care of Isaac's mother. Everything related to taking care of Isaac's health had been one of the most difficult things Verosika has had to face in life, but not the only thing. The political, demographic, and geographic landscape of hell has been in total chaos these past few weeks. Okay, not that those areas were a field of roses, but lately there was so much turmoil that even the most apolitical were aware of it and were screwed like everyone else in different ways. Which is not for less because the Ring of Envy, one of the pillars of hell, had disappeared without leaving any trace. At first Verosika didn't pay attention to the matter, mainly because it sounded so crazy and unreal that it wasn't worth her time and she had a broken boy to focus on, more important than fake news, but as time went by, and more people talked about it, Verosika found it more difficult to ignore. It then became totally impossible for her, when panic seized much of hell, and riots became more violent than ever before. It didn't help not getting any response from the higher-ups in hell, for the first 2 weeks, but the thing was clear, of what had been the circle of envy, now there was only a wasteland of infinite size, which was glitched and distorted, a now uninhabitable place. It was not until the beginning of week 3 that Lucifer himself gave his official statement. The circle of envy is no more. Those were the words of the MSTR and Lord of the Underworld. The worst thing was not that he confirmed it, no, the worst was that he didn't even have an answer, like how a complete circle of hell had disappeared without leaving any trace. There was no explanation of why envy became in glitcheated wasteland, but one thing was clear, Lucifer and the High Command were investing all their effort and energy to find out what had happened. Needless to say, many saw this as a sign of the end of time, that God got fed up with everything, and began to erase the reality that he himself created, starting with the Ring of Envy. And of course, the theories were everywhere. Be that as it may, many had friends, family, businesses, treasures and much, much more within that circle, and now it had disappeared with no indication of where it all went. No one could say for sure what had happened to it, all they knew was that the other circles were more than a little freaked out, afraid that theirs would be next. Verosika had those concerns as well, but she did her best to squash them down. She was pulled from her thoughts when Isaac proudly handed her another picture he drew. "Oh, yeah, that's really nice, sweetie," she cooed, taking it and looking it over. "Ah. It's that woman again, the angel lady." Isaac nodded his head. "Now, who is she exactly?" Isaac tilted his head to the side, trying to work out how best to explain it to her. Since he couldn't speak, he began to look for the drawings to communicate with her, using the images and the letters. Verosika found it difficult at first, but she got into it quickly, and now was understanding a lot of what he was trying to say. Verosika carefully analyzed the image, seeing the figure of the red angel, despite being a drawing made by a child, it was of decent quality. The bells were ringing in her head, the color red, that the angel was a woman, that she was fighting with Isaac's mother, and suddenly Verosika's mind clicked. It was me. He saw me in my succubus form. And he thought my succubus form was an angel. She said in her mind, and began to have an internal nervous breakdown, visibly sweating a little while maintaining a wide, perhaps too wide smile for the little one of hers. This isn't a surprise, but it's especially touching and promising, was a fleeting and strange thought that she had, which she dismissed as quickly as it came to her head. "Ah. I see. So you saw a red angel come and save you from your mother before I found you," she said softly. Isaac nodded, smiling brightly, his big adorable eyes twinkling slightly. The succubus felt her heart warm at the same time that she felt a deep fear in her stomach. If he had seen her, and if he thought she was an angel, it only worried her even more about how he would react if he knew the truth about her. She was very much the kind of thing he was. A demon that was meant to come and get innocent children and was never meant to be seen as saviors. What if he felt betrayed when he found out the truth? What if he began to fear her? She didn't think her heart could bear to lose this small dose of love that she had obtained. Isaac was like a little gift that she had been given by fate itself, and she didn't want to lose that gift. Verosika relaxed. The succubus knew that sooner rather than later, she was going to have to reveal it to him, and she had already planned to reveal it to him today, because dragging it out more than necessary could only bring more problems in the long run. She already had everything prepared for her in text to reveal their true form to Isaac, to what she was going to say to how to reveal his form. But even so, Verosika couldn't avoid that overwhelming fear that Isaac would react extremely badly. Even with everything planned, this was still a risky bet where the numbers were not very in her favor. The biggest problem wasn't that the boy rejected her, that was something extremely horrible, but for Verosika the worst thing was that revealing this truth to Isaac could cause him terrible damage to his already battered psyche. That was what she feared the most. The poor boy had already been hurt enough, and Verosika would be the one to make him suffer the most. His savior was a demon. That was going to be a very harrowing experience for him, and he would have no idea what her true intentions are. Would he think she just saved him so she could do something terrible to him later? Oh, she prayed that wasn't the case. She let out a soft sigh and leaned her elbows against the bed with a smile. "You're such a good little artist," she murmured softly. Isaac beamed at the praise, and he set to drawing another picture. Verosika watched him patiently as he worked. He held up another photo featuring the two of them. This time around, it was a photo of the two of them holding hands in a big heart shape. Verosika idly noted that it was the kind of drawing a child would make of themselves and their parents. It was really cute. She totally didn't tear up a bit. Nobody ever could accuse her of that sht. Verosika averted her gaze to see the other drawings the boy had made, and only that, not to hide and dry a tear she didn't have. Despite being a little boy, Isaac was already organized. He divided his drawings into 3 categories, something like that. They really were in 3 piles, and she was the one who organized it, but he was still a little boy, so Verosika wouldn't ask much of him. The ones in the first category were the varied drawings, from drawings of the room, hospital staff, the sky, cars, and people that he saw through the window. They were varied and without any particular theme. The other category of drawings was more special, and it brought a smile to the face of the disguised succubus. Mainly her and the Red Angel, both interacting with Isaac, either saving him or protecting him from monsters, in the case of the Red Angel, or Verosika taking care of him, comforting him or singing to him. But it wasn't the only thing. There were also drawings of Tex, who came to visit the boy from time to time, as well as the hospital staff with whom Isaac was less afraid of. Also of 2 cats and 2 dogs. Verosika still wasn't entirely sure, but if she had to bet, she guessed they were the boy's pets. What happened to them was still a mystery, but if the succubus had to theorize, she assumed that they did not have a good ending. At least Isaac remembered them fondly, and kept them alive in his memory. No doubt they must have been very important to the boy if that were the case. Then there were drawings of different creatures of very varied colors and of different appearance. Some vaguely resemble babies, others like flies, others like worms, among many more. Verosika really wasn't sure what they meant at all. Even though they were drawn in a friendly way, it was rare for a child to draw things like that. And finally, the basement category. Both categories, this one and the previous one, were based on the same place, the basement, but while the previous one was about the good though weird things found there, this one was the exact opposite, a collection of drawings where Isaac embodied all kinds of horrors and nightmares. Deformed monsters, murderous FTS, dismembered human, and animal bodies, which confirmed to Verosika what happened to Isaac's pets. Sometimes they were just 1 or 2 pieces, or an unholy mix of everything at once. That and much more, but of course his mother, represented in several forms, all of them disgusting, horrible and uglier. Very appropriate for a human like her was Verosika's thought, but undoubtedly the worst of all, the one that terrified Verosika the most, were the drawings where Isaac faced Satan, where either he wins or is killed by the devil. Like I'd ever let that happen to Isaac, she said in her mind. We'll see. Her mind responded with another intrusive thought. Those drawings were the ones that terrified Verosika the most, regarding how he would react to her when he saw her true form. It was terrifying, and mortifying, and Verosika, for a child to be so mentally damaged, to create what she could only call a complete personal hell, so detailed, was proof of Isaac's vivid and marred imagination. He didn't find it so strange that he wakes up screaming, or that he has panic attacks. In fact, that he hasn't completely broken, and has the ability to smile and be happy is the real surprise. Verosika is glad to have arrived in Isaac's life on time. Interestingly, in addition to Satan, there were representations of other demons and similar entities, a demon named Azazel, Lilith, or at least a really bizarre version of her, and demon babies. The funny thing is that these were in the good basement category. Isaac's representations of angels, although these were faceless humanoids, the implications of demons and nightmares had a detailed face, but angels don't. It's just another thing to check on a long list of signs of severe childish trauma. Of course, for Verosika the angels and everything that had to do with heaven, were always something bad. Beginning with the annual exterminations, and because according to third parties who met them in person, they were all arrogant with their heads so stuck in the ass, so they were in a negative light, or non-existent in a certain way, was something that makes the succubus happy. But that a human child does not draw the angels with a face? Verosika should think of that as a minor detail, but considering the whole context, that just worried her. She sat and smiled as he happily showed off his drawings, making her best guess as to what each one was and making the effort to guess why he put them in each pile. Isaac would beam when she got it right, while shaking his head and miming a correction when she was wrong. Soon enough, she had seen all his drawings, and he sat and smiled up at her warmly. Verosika smiled back, then let out a soft sigh and leaned forward on the bed, hands resting on her chin as her elbows propped themselves up on the bed. "Those are really nice drawings, sweetie, you're a great little artist," she cooed. Isaac beamed at the praise. She let out a sigh. "Isaac, I've been wondering, you're scared, aren't you? After all you've been through, you're happy and smiling, but aren't you suffering from it?" Isaac's smile faded and he looked down at the bed, clutching at his bedsheet. Verosika winced. Hey, I'm sorry, you don't have to dash." Isaac shook his head, grabbed another piece of paper, and began to draw. What was he drawing? His nightmares. Verosika, while regretting a little to ask that, saw what Isaac drew quickly. First on both sides, by the time he finished another one quickly, and when he finished correcting them, then he showed them to Verosika. The first was a drawing of him, in fetal position, surrounded by various deformed and terrifying creatures. Verosika managed to recognize several of them, and remember the name of some of them. Sho, Gemini, Mulligan, among others, were those that the disguised demon could recognize, because she saw them recurrently in Isaac's drawings. And of course, rising above all of them, like a huge mountain of deformed meat, she was in one of her many ways, Isaac's mother. The drawing had written at the top the phrase, "They will always come for me." Verosika signed a mixture of huge anger and sadness, because while still dead, the dog did not leave Isaac alone. On the other hand, this was expected, his traumas were not going to disappear only in the course of 2 weeks, but still those sights were something that Verosika could not avoid. She looked at the other drawing and this was very different. It was Isaac, only in this case, instead of being surrounded by horrors, it was surrounded by a ray of light, looking up, or more specifically to someone who floated above him, with a smile. An angel, and not the faceless angels, but to Verosika in their human form, which was surrounded by musical notes, with serrated eyes and a peaceful smile and extended arms, presumably by descending to hug Isaac. At the feet of Isaac, the phrase was written, "You always see for me, and sometimes save me." Verosika's eyes widened at that, and smiled softly, tears beginning to form in the corners of her eyes. "Oh, you are just too sweet," she cooed, pulling the boy into a tight embrace and gently rubbing the back of the little boy's head. Isaac leaned into the embrace and closed his eyes with a content sigh, resting his tiny head against Verosika's chest. The succubus giggled softly and leaned down to press a kiss against the top of the little boy's head. He squeaked softly in happiness. After several minutes, she pulled away. "I promise you, Isaac, I'll do my best to live up to the vision of me you have in your head. I'm not perfect, but I do know one thing, and it's that I will be as close to it as I possibly can just for you." She booped his nose. The moment was interrupted by the sound of a ringing cell phone. It was Verosika's, who quickly silenced the phone, and was about to ignore the message, when she saw that the sender was Vortex, indicating that he was already reaching her position. Seeing this, Verosika sighed, the time to tell Isaac the truth, at least the part of showing him as the real form of her was doing. She could feel the pressure of fear in her chest, so she hugs Isaac closer, something that the boy loved. It was something scary, even more after seeing the drawings, and as he saw her. But Verosika also knew that she could not continue with him, without telling him the truth, and this was something that had to be done sooner rather than later. She knew she couldn't hide the truth, and the lie would explode in his face. She sighed, hoping she wasn't making a big mistake, and awaited the arrival of Vortex, who would also show Isaac his true form. "So Isaac, hypothetically, what would your reaction be if you found out that the Red Angel was actually a succubus from the bad place? Would that make you like her any less?" Isaac took a piece of paper and wrote. "Hippopotamus, where is a hippopotamus?" Verosika blinked, and she would have laughed out loud, if it wasn't for the serious matter she was in, that didn't stop the succubus from letting out a light, soft laugh. No honey, it doesn't have to do with hippos, it's hypothetically, and it's a word used to describe a situation that isn't necessarily real. Verosika explained, and Isaac seemed to get the message as he gave her a thumbs up as a sign. Isaac blinked and tilted his head to the side. He gave it some thought. So he's been told that all the stuff from hell was bad, but if the Red Angel was from hell, she definitely wasn't bad, because she saved him and made sure he ended up with Miss Verosika. So she had to be good, right? Maybe heaven got some stuff wrong and put the wrong people in the wrong places. Well, this was a hypothetical scenario after all, but he thought he had his answer. He grabbed some paper and wrote something down before showing it to her. It said, I don't care, sure sav me she's knees I love her even if she is from heck. He censored the word hell because he was worried he'd get in trouble. Isaac was always taught that hell and everything in it was a place of horrible things, where the wicked would suffer forever. Where the prostitutes, gluttons, wrathful, envious, greedy, liars and others who have abandoned or have been abandoned by God, also, the home of demons. So, it would seem obvious that if the Red Angel were a demon, Isaac would have to hate her. But Isaac had faced the horrors of the basement for years, having for his only company and support his familiars, who supported and comforted him, and many of his family and friends were demons. So, in the hypothetical case that the Red Angel turned out to be a demon, Isaac would not have many reasons to hate her, much less when he himself was a demon. He was the devil, and that is why his parents fought and separated. That is why he was condemned to hell, for having caused his parents so much suffering and for having destroyed his family. Or that's what his mother told him. But he didn't want to be evil, he didn't want to hurt anyone, and according to his logic, if even condemned to hell, he doesn't want to do evil, that means that maybe there are others like him there. Verosika asked the boy, with remarkable concern and fear. Isaac did not understand what he meant with that, but he worried him, partly for what could happen to him, and partly so he could happen to the kind and appealing woman who was cared for. Even so, he nodded with his head, whatever she wanted to tell him, was sure that while she was there, he was not going to be hurt. This relieves notably to Verosika, not quite and that even could see him, but at least now it seemed that whatever she wanted to tell her, it would be less difficult to speak it. And that's how a few minutes passed until someone knocked on the door. After Verosika told him he could come in, Tex entered the room. And when she saw her bodyguard Verosika was horrified. What happened to you? She exclaimed upon seeing Vortex, and inadvertently startled Isaac by the sudden outburst. Tex had a few bandages and gauze in his arms, legs, and some in the torso and face. I had some problems with a gang before leaving leaving my girlfriend at her place, and I went through a bad neighborhood. They wanted to rob me and they caught me distracted, but I managed to fix it easily. Although they did manage to land a few hits on me, nothing serious, so use the first aid kit before you come. Vortex explained, managing to change his words, remembering that the little fellow was listening to him too. But why didn't you tell me? I would have cancelled everything, at least until tomorrow. Verosika asked him with concern, seeing him beaten like this. You told me that this was very important, that I couldn't expect one more day, and that no matter what, I had to come. Vortex reminded Verosika of her words. The succubus felt embarrassed for a moment, because she knew how diligent Tex was with work and with Isaac's affairs, and she realized that she should have told him that he could make an exception in cases like that. You still had to tell me that that happened to you, but I admit it was also my fault. Tell me how bad you are, asked Verosika. Nothing serious, just some bruises, and cuts. The hellhound responded, remaining neutral. And what happened to them, the ones that attacked you did you run away from them? Verosika asked, wanting to know how Tex managed to get rid of his attackers. No, I faced them, and I beat them, the hellhound replied proudly. And how many were there? There were like 14 armed guys. What? 14. And you beat them by yourself? That's impossible, said Verosika, not believing what she was hearing. But it's true, I managed to beat all of them, just with my hands. Tex, I know you're strong, but you can't tell me you faced 14 armed guys by yourself, and beat them all. You'd have to be at least half as strong as an overlord, or be very lucky. But it's true, and now that you mentioned it, if I was lucky, some of them had firearms, but the majority either missed or couldn't fire because their weapons jammed. Vortex said, surprised and relieved at the same time. Were you really that lucky? Verosika asked, surprised by that. Yes, from there they went to hitting with anything they could grab, but I managed to fight them, leaving everyone unconscious with one punch each. Is that true? With just one punch, the succubus asked, astonished, divided. On the one hand, what Tex was saying sounded too fantastic, but on the other hand the hellhound really was one of the few honest people she had met. Yeah, they just bruised me a bit in the end. Hey, I've been having some luck lately. While Verosika was torn between being disgusted with herself and Tex for this, and being happy and touched by what the hellhound did, Isaac was clearer on his feelings, pure horror, sadness and rage. He was concentrating on drawing, when suddenly Verosika screamed and scared him, and she saw what happened. Tex was the nicest, kindest person he knew, after Verosika, and even though he didn't fully understand, knowing that he was hurt by bad people, and left in that state, he could feel how the anger towards those who hurt the pleasant giant filled him for brief moments, and without anyone noticing, the glass of water on Isaac's table began to heat up to the point that it began to boil, as well as some things began to shake a bit. But everything stopped when the boy heard Vortex say that he won, so that only sadness, horror, and happiness remained, because although he was victorious, and defeated the bad guys, as if he were a hero that he used to see, in the end he ended up hurt. Isaac really wanted to find a way to ease Tex's pain, but the only solution that came to mind was that when he was in pain, and Verosika kissed him when he was hurt, or the people at the hospital had to do something to him to cure him, like when they removed all the tubes and wires, or pricked him with needles to vaccinate him. That hurt, but the appealing lady made him feel better humming that favorite song, or giving him a kiss. Sometimes on the forehead, or sometimes in the area where he feels pain. Isaac wished he could do that himself, give Vortex healing kisses to make him feel better. That's it. Verosika and Vortex were talking, when suddenly they heard two particular sounds. The first was a familiar poof, and the second sound was the strangest. Purr-oo-ee. It was like a mix of a toy squeal, a pigeon cooing, and a cat purring, all fused into one strange, but pleasant sound. They turned to see Isaac and saw what was floating in front of him. He was a very small creature, the size of a newborn. In fact he vaguely resembled a baby, a toy baby, or rather, the caricature of a toy baby, but less disturbing. With its ruby red skin with a texture similar to RBB, but more alive, without legs, it only had a stump. It was what was from the waist down, black eyes, and tiny arms and hands, and completely black eyes, and a smile. It was the strangest thing the succubus and the hellhound had ever seen, but also very adorable. Isaac, who is that? Verosika asked. Isaac searched the piles of drawings that he had. From what both disguised demons saw, they were the items, and after searching, he took out a sheet. They both saw it. It was a drawing of the same creature, which was written on it. Little Chad. And between parentheses under the name could be read. Give kisses. Vortex blinked. Wait, what? Before he could react, the creature suddenly pounced and pressed his lips to his cheek for several seconds, giving him a kiss that he detected had the smell of candy, before pulling away. The hellhound blinked owlishly at the unexpected action, then looked up at the creature. Thanks, he said awkwardly. Suddenly, he was surrounded by a red glow, which only lasted for a second. Vortex, do you feel different there? Verosika asked. Huh. I feel just fine. He looked at the bandages surrounding him and let out a gasp before ripping them off to reveal all of his wounds were nowhere to be found. Wow. Unbelievable. Man, what can't the little guy do? He's really amazing. Isaac smiled at the compliment and clapped his hands, happy to see that it had worked. Verosika laughed and gently rubbed his head. Good job, honey. you're full of surprises, aren't you? Now, let's remember to thank little Chad, too. She gave the little creature a pat on the head. Pre-ie. Little Chad let out a high-pitched squealing noise, enjoying the show of affection, then went into Isaac's arms. Vortex checked his entire body, everything seemed to be going well, until he moved his left shoulder. Ouch! Vortex exclaimed when he felt that he was still hurt. Is Tex alright? Verosika asked, a little worried at hearing the hellhound, a concern shared by Isaac. It's just my shoulder, it still hurts. Although the little red thing did an incredible job almost entirely, it seemed that a single kiss was not enough to reverse all the damage. Both Isaac and little Chad realized this, and with just one look from the former, the red creature knew what to do. Mwack, he put both hands on his mouth, to give an air kiss, and to the surprise of the succubus and the hellhound in front of the creature, a heart quickly materialized, but not a real one. The materialized object was a red heart, whose main characteristic was that it beat like a heart, while it lit up with a red light to the rhythm of the beats. Isaac looked at the item with a smile, before picking it up to offer it to Vortex. The disguised hellhound took the object with curiosity and amazement. It was the strangest thing anyone had ever given him, and then he remembered what happened to his eye, and he waited for it to disappear as it did with the eye. For a brief moment, he was afraid, since even though his new eye was incredible, having his heart replaced by this object was scary, but after a while the object was still in his hand. The disguised hellhound looked confused at Isaac, who in turn also looked at him confused, until he realized it and pointed to his own mouth so that he could eat it. Vortex hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he decided to do it. He held the object despite throbbing, having a texture like marshmallow and jelly bean, and smelled like berries. When he put it in his mouth and chewed it, he found that it tasted sweet and similar to red berries, as well as a smooth texture, and when he swallowed it, he felt the effect instantly. All the minor ailments that remained were completely gone, now he felt even better than before facing those criminals. The hellhound grinned. Well, how do you like that? You're a real miracle worker, aren't ya, kid? Then he blinked. Ha! Come to think of it though, can't you have that little guy heal you too, so you don't have to hang around the hospital anymore? Isaac winced and wrote down on a piece of paper. Verosika looked at it and winced sadly. There, on the paper, was his explanation. 1. Don't deserve it. 2. Don't want to leave because Ms. Vroska will be gone too. Oh, Isaac, I'm not going to stop seeing you just because you get discharged from the hospital and you not deserving to be healed. Well, that's just plain wrong, you do deserve it, you don't need to keep punishing yourself like this. Verosika hugs Isaac immediately with force, although ensuring not enough to hurt him, totally saddened by the situation, and with some tears peeling through the corners of his eyes. She already knew that Isaac was not very mentally, but that being so young he despises himself in such a way, that she is denied to heal even having the cure literally in her hands, not only because it is a matter that she abandons it, but that he thinks he does not deserve it. It was something that breaks his heart to the succubus. The sadness, and also the rage and the pain were what filled the broken heart of Verosika. The succubus never in her life believed that she would hate someone more than she hated Blitzo, the one who had the ability to ruin everything he got involved in, but here and now, Verosika was completely sure that Isaac's former mother had succeeded in spades. And Vortex did not stay behind either, he shared both the sadness and anger. He remembers what it was to be in the Hell's reception system, although seeing other hellhounds who are was not impossible, that some of them were as mentally damaged, as to believe that he did not deserve to be helped. It was something that rarely looked. In general, these hellhounds that were trained, read it, tortured until they break, to be obedient and loyal to the extreme, to the point that failing their masters was an atrocious act. These hellhounds were rarely returned to the reception system, but usually because their MSTR died or fell from them, but even the cruelest were pragmatic and would not waste a good LBR. And it was a situation that no one knew how to deal with, or that few cared to deal with. Not even his own girlfriend could completely fix that. Remembering that situation filled Vortex with disgust and anger, and seeing that a mother did that to her own son, that she broke him both physically and mentally, until the poor boy ended up like that, was a frightful and abominable vision, as well as heartbreaking. He would say this is worse, since Isaac had the cure in his own hands, for that great pain, but he refused to use it because he did not believe he deserved to be healthy and happy, but the fear of abandonment. Both Verosika and Vortex wanted to find Isaac's mother, to get answers and to put her through immeasurable pain. But unfortunately, they have not been able to carry that still, between serving Isaac and their respective work, as well as the preparation of the arrival of Isaac, both Verosika and Vortex have been busy. Not to mention the whole issue that the circle of envy disappeared. Not that that's needed anymore was the thought that suddenly came to her mind, but she once again dismissed it. Verosika squeezed him a little tighter. Now listen to me, little mister, she said, trying not to sound angry or upset. I want you to tell little Chad to heal you. I want him to get rid of as many of those injuries as possible. Can you do that for me? Isaac tilted his head. He had to obey now. He couldn't say no to the woman that had taken such good care of him. He turned to look at little Chad, who tilted his head and let out a hopeful series of chirps. Isaac nodded his head, and little Chad gleefully did a series of flips in the air. Verosika smiled at the adorable sight, and then little Chad flew past her and began to smother Isaac in kisses, getting a soft squeaky giggle from the boy. It was a cute sound. She smiled and put her hands on her peach as she waited for the familiar to finish his work. Soon enough, little Chad pulled away. Seeing little Chad, Verosika made a mental note to see in detail the drawings of the boy, more than anything the category of the items, later, something of the utmost importance that she could not forget, since from what she had seen so far, it seemed that this pile was a list of powers and abilities of Isaac, but before that, there were two more urgent matters to deal with. Now Isaac, I have to tell you two very important things, and I want you to hear them clearly, Verosika said to the boy to get her attention, which he did. Once having Isaac's full attention, she began to speak. First and most important, you matter. I know we've only known each other for 3 weeks, but only a couple of days has been enough for me to know that, despite what you went through, you're still a sweet, imaginative, very cute child, and that you deserve all the love and affection in the world. No matter what that monster that tortured you said, you deserve to be healthy, and you deserve to be happy. Do you understand? She said firmly, but at the same time soft and with her voice, as well as her words, loaded with all the determination, security and affection that could be, while she looked at Isaac with a look full of maternal warmth and determination that was not the discussion that took place. She tells the truth, kiddo. Anyone can see that after all the after all the storm you went through for no reason, you deserve that and more. Vortex contributed his part. He wasn't sure if he should intervene or not, but he'll be damned if he just remains silent, and doesn't contribute anything to help. Who returned his eye, and healed him without asking for anything in return. Isaac looked at her, his face filled with doubt, clearly confused by the paradigm shift he was facing, and that he didn't even know how to deal with. On the one hand, he wasn't sure if it was true, if he truly deserves forgiveness and happiness, after what he did to his family, but on the other, he did not want to contradict the woman who had only shown love and affection, especially because part of him also wanted it. So, still uncertain, he nodded affirmatively. Verosika smiled at this. She still saw that the boy had doubts, so she would make sure to shower him with as much love and affection as possible, enough for him not to doubt again. She knew that this was not over, and that the path to heal Isaac's mind was still long, but she would gladly walk that path, and she was already advancing. Okay, with that out, at least for now, let's move on to the next thing. So Vortex, make sure the door is locked, and get ready since it's the moment of truth. Verosika said to her bodyguard, who I get what she meant, so he made sure to close the door, and got ready. Once that was done, he raised his thumb to her, to indicate that everything was ready. Very well, Isaac, the second thing I want to tell you, is what we discussed a while ago. It is the secret that I have been keeping from you, and it is time that you know everything about it. Remember what I told you. Whatever happens, you have to know that there is no bad intention on my part towards you, she said as she got ready, and Isaac stared at her expectantly of what would happen. Vortex also prepared himself mentally and physically for what was to come. He really hoped the boy wouldn't despise him, not just because he was a demon from hell, although that last part would be omitted, but because he was a hellhound, the lowest of the low in the hierarchy, just above him. The imps, and that only sometimes. The succubus took a deep breath, then turned to the hellhound and nodded. Vortex nodded back, and then the two of them focused for a brief moment, before, in their place, stood two figures, a large bulky dog, and the. Isaac's eyes widened at the familiar figure before him. It was her. Was the Red Angel. Miss Verosika was the Red Angel all the time. But no, she wasn't quite an angel. She had bat wings, and her tail was all pointy, and she had horns. So the Red Angel was actually a demon all along. Isaac was surprised, but not upset. He himself was destined to go to hell, after all, so there was no problem with befriending some demons. Verosika and Vortex were a bit surprised by Isaac's behavior. They expected screaming, crying, or maybe something scary. But the boy, although he seemed surprised, and also somewhat discouraged, took the news quite calmly and positively. Maybe much more than he should. Isaac, is everything all right? Aren't you scared? Verosika asked, a bit worried, although she was glad that Isaac didn't have a mental breakdown right now, or that he disowned her, that he took the news so. The boy simply shook his head, with a rather jarring serenity, and a palpable sadness. Okay, this wasn't what he expected, and it's not that I'm complaining. But why aren't you scared or even angry? Before this, Isaac took a piece of paper, and began to write, and he still hadn't finished writing, when Verosika was alarmed, when tears began to come out of Isaac's eyes. He took several minutes to write, stopping from time to time to wipe his eyes. He finished writing, and handed the paper to the succubus to read. And when she did, Verosika's heart broke. Because I deserve to be in hell, I'm the devil, I hurt my family, my parents, I made them separate, they hated each other, it's all my fault, and you come to take me for that, because I'm a monster, may eternal punishment pray to me. That was what was written, with the typical spelling and handwriting of a child his age, but still legible. She had no idea what to say to that. All she could do was kneel down and pull him into a hug. She was beginning to tear up, and that meant Vortex had to step up. He let out a sigh. Kid. Don't you think that kind of stuff about yourself? Isaac and Verosika looked at him. If a family splits up, then it's never the kid's fault. Ever. Family splits up. It's always because the parents are having problems. Maybe one of them's no good. Maybe they just fall out of love. But you can't let yourself think that just because you were born, they split up. Verosika smiled at him. He continued. I was adopted at a young age, and my folks split up too. And I used to think the same kind of thing you are right now. Thought it was all because of me. But you know something? My mom sat me down, and she told me that there were problems long before I was taken in. Sometimes they'll tell you it's your fault, but they're only saying that because they don't want to take responsibility for their own issues. Isaac was surprised by the big dog's words, and although they didn't completely convince him, they did cause conflict in the boy. Verosika stopped hugging Isaac, then stared at him, tears still in her eyes, and she spoke to him seriously. Isaac, I'm not here for your soul, I'm not here to punish you, or drag you to hell, for what you deserve. What that woman told you, whatever she told you was a lie, I've known it. Several people in my life, even Lucifer himself once, and listen to this, you don't deserve hell, nor all the pain that monster caused you. Isaac was stunned, and even more in a mental conflict. Everything he believed until now, as something 100% sure now no longer seemed to be. Before she could express anything, Verosika continued. I didn't save you because I came for your soul, or as part of some diabolical punishment or plague. No, I did it because you were a child suffering such excruciating and undeserved torment, and I have stayed by your side because you are someone who deserves to be loved, protected and cared for, a little star and a wonderful child, who did not deserve anything that happened, and the time I have spent with you has shown it. At this moment the young Isaac couldn't take it anymore and began to cry, totally confused, scared and not knowing what to believe now. Verosika didn't say anything, she just kept hugging him, trying to give him all the love she could. She saw that little Chad hugged the boy as well, letting out a soft little "pree," trying to comfort Isaac. Vortex reached over as well and rested his paw on the boy's head, rubbing it gently to add his own form of condolences. Isaac sobbed into Verosika's chest as she gently rubbed her small, fragile back. The succubus smiled gratefully at the hellhound, who shrugged with a small smile. This went on for several minutes before Isaac finally calmed down. Verosika gently pulled his head away from her body to find that he was fast asleep. She laughed softly and placed a kiss on his forehead, leaving a black mark on the spot. She carefully took him into his arms and cradled him like a baby, gently rocking him back and forth to keep him as calm and peaceful as possible. Isaac turned in her embrace and nuzzled her tiny face into her dress before innocently sucking his thumb as she clutched little Chad like a teddy bear. Touched by the sight of Isaac and his little friend, Verosika smiled, seeing the sleeping boy, before placing him on the bed. She frowned as she looked around her, saw the basement pile and remembered what he had written on her drawing. "They always come for me." She frowned, he needed to rest, and Verosika hoped that this time she wouldn't have to face any of her nightmares, and if that happened, she hoped that she would be able to reach his dreams quickly, just as he showed her in the other drawing. Although she hoped that now that she had told him the truth, and her reaction to that information, Verosika doubted if Isaac would continue to see her in the same way. They put on their disguises and went out to discuss what had happened and how they would proceed. "I can't believe it," she said with a 1,000-meter gaze, remembering the whole situation. "Me neither, this is worse than we thought." Vortex responded. "I knew I wasn't well, I knew I had terrible mental injuries, but at this level?" Verosika said as she plopped down on one of the aisle seats. "We knew he was broken, but enough to believe that he deserves to be in hell. And for him to accept it so well. I can't describe it." Vortex said as he sat next to her, also affected by the whole situation. Verosika went from having a look of surprise and sadness, to a look of pure unadulterated rage as she clenched her fists tightly, while clenching her teeth just as hard, while angry and sad tears ran down her cheeks, ruining even more her makeup. "I'm going to find that bee, and I'm going to make her suffer 1,000,000,000 times for everything she did to him," she nearly screamed in fury, holding herself back only because Isaac was on the other side of the door, and he needed to rest. When she did this, an aura that looked like blood red fire covered her, as her appearance wavered between her human disguise and her real form, the lights flickered and the area around them shook. Vortex looked at her, with some fear and surprise, but also sharing the same anger and at the same time her sadness. Verosika looked at her hands and saw how she blinked a little confused by what was happening, so she forced herself to calm down, and when her disguise stopped blinking, she looked around her. Luckily no one was there near them. She breathed out and inhaled a few more times to completely calm down, and once the anger passed, only sadness remained. She began to sob again in a low voice because of the situation, or more specifically because of Isaac. She didn't know how it was possible that something so horrible could happen to him and leave him in that state. She knew she wouldn't react all that well to the revelation, but of all the bad reactions she expected, she didn't anticipate this reaction from Isaac, nor did she discover that her mind was even more damaged than she knew. She believed that in these weeks she had already seen all the damage caused by that monster to the little boy's mind, but it seems that those wounds were deeper and more terrible than what was seen with the naked eye. Vortex was in a similar situation, but to a lesser degree. Although he wasn't crying like Verosika, he was certainly on the verge as well, the tears falling from his eyes giving it away. After a while, they both managed to assimilate the situation. The sadness did not disappear, but if it was reduced enough for both of them to be able to analyze what they had learned, maybe they could help the poor boy. At the moment, what they knew was that Isaac had a family, and whatever happened to them, it was something very bad, and apparently only he and his mother were left, who was a crazy religious woman who tortured and killed him, blamed for everything. Both Vortex and Verosika felt a terrible disgust, as well as anger towards that woman, who with what they have seen, could dilute that she was like that before, a mother who when she could not blame and abuse her spouse, blamed and abused her son of hers, unable to recognize her own faults. The hatred they felt from before was strengthened by the feeling of familiarity, that was something typical of seeing in hell. And thanks to that, now Isaac also blamed himself, to the point that he believed that he himself was the devil and deserved not only death, but hell. So what's the plan, boss? What are we going to do with Isaac? Vortex asked, wanting to hear a plan, anything, to know how to help the boy. Verosika thought about it for a moment. Well, for now all I can think of is giving him as much love and care as possible. After that, I'm not so sure, I don't know what to do. Verosika admitted she had no idea how to deal with this situation. I didn't expect him to be so bad, I don't know what to do to help him. Verosika said desperately. You don't need much, all you need is common sense, and giving him love, compassion, and care and therapy. Vortex told her. Yeah, I guess that could work, how do you know so much about it? Verosika asked, surprised that Vortex, despite not having a son, knew so much. I'm not an expert, but I know what not to do, and my plan is not ideal. In fact, it's pretty generic, but at least you'll give him what he was denied for so long, and what he so badly needs. Well, that helps a lot, thanks. Tomorrow you'll be discharged, right? Vortex asked, to which Verosika nodded. According to the doctor, yes, tomorrow he can leave the hospital. Why? Well, how about you take him out to do something simple tomorrow, maybe eat ice cream? I doubt he even knows what that is. That sounds excellent. She clapped her hands together with a beaming smile. Just the two of us spending a day together. You're a genius, Vortex, Simir, gimme a hug. She pulled the hellhound into an embrace, and he chuckled and rubbed the back of his head. Ah, you're not usually this affectionate, boss. He chuckled. Thought you wanted to keep it strictly business. Meh. You've earned the right to be called a friend at this point. You've helped Isaac a lot. Verosika replied, breaking the hug. Ah, you think so? Hey yeah, me and my girlfriend were actually talking about having pups in the future. Kinda got that dad instinct going in me, you know. Oh, right, your girlfriend. Huh. We'll have to introduce her to Isaac too. Vortex was surprised at that. Really, boss? You're comfortable with me bringing my girl to meet him? Verosika considered the hellhound's words for a moment, and then answered. Actually, I plan to meet her first, both for me to be sure, and to let her know about the situation with Isaac, but considering who you are, I can trust that you're a good judge of character, and that she's as decent as you are. Vortex's tail would have wagged if he had been in his hellhound form at the time. Oh, you bet she is, she's the best girl you'll ever meet in your life. Seriously hard to find decent folks down where we come from, seems like everywhere you go there's some druggie or some mafia punk or some crazy guy waiting to gut ya. Verosika scowled. Ugh, don't remind me, she had more or less sworn off romance altogether at this point after all of her partners had done nothing but disappoint her, from Blitzo to that stupid fish Chaz right down to that bitchy news reporter she had a one-night stand with. It seemed she was only ever going to attract assholes, so why bother? You're one lucky hound, Texas. You managed to catch a real winner of a girl. Vortex smiled at the compliment. Thank you, boss, I hope you can find someone the same or better at some point. I doubt it, but thank you, it means a lot. Verosika said, touched by that, but in reality, she saw everything as too difficult, bordering on the impossible. She would not only have to find a person who was decent, but one who wanted to have a child, and not just any child, but one that required as much care and love as Isaac did. The odds of finding someone like that in hell are so high, it's easier to beat Lucifer in a game of chance, or defeat Asmodeus in bed. Verosika looked at Vortex for a moment, he was the closest person she knew, who met all the characteristics. In another reality, in which he didn't have a girlfriend, and she wasn't so upset, maybe she would have made him her boyfriend, but Vortex already has a partner, and Verosika won't even bother to consider proposing a polyamory. Well, I guess for now it's going to be Isaac and me, and that actually sounds pretty good, she thought to herself with a smile. She rather liked the idea of being a single mom. Just her and her little one spending time together and bonding with little to get in the way, and she even had her designated babysitter right there in the form of Vortex, though it was also possible that she could get some of her posse to look after him too. Isaac's story had visibly touched the hearts of at least a couple of them, even if Josh was still being a giant sack of PP about it. She would have to keep Isaac away from him as much as possible because it was clear as day, he wasn't going to like him. She looked back at the room. Well, he had little Chad heal him up, so we should probably check with the doctors to see if there's anything left over that we should worry about, right? Sounds like a great idea, we can do that, and if there's nothing wrong, which I don't think thanks to little Chad, we can take him away tomorrow. Well, let's let him rest for now, he needs it. I'm going to check again if everything is ready for Isaac's arrival at his new home, Verosika said as she took out the phone and sent some messages to her crew and the employees of her mansion. Actually, that was another thing I wanted to ask you, are you sure that taking it to hell is a correct idea? Is there no way to leave it in a safe place here on Earth? Like your vacation home? Asked Vortex. Verosika put the phone down for a moment and looked at it, before sighing in disappointment. The truth is that no, I've already thought about it, but I can't stay outside of hell for long, and even if I can leave him in that house, Isaac can't and doesn't want to be separated from me for long. My job is very demanding, and there will be days when I won't be able to see him. If I leave him on Earth, those days will turn into months, and we both know how bad that would be for him. Yeah, sounds logical, Vortex nodded. It's not that I want to take it. If I had a chance to stay on Earth as long as I want, I wouldn't take him with me to hell, but we have no other choice. I understand, but it's just that I don't find it entirely comfortable taking him to such a dangerous place, Vortex said, disgusted with the situation. I'm less than comfortable, believe me, but don't worry, I've prepared everything so that Isaac's stay is as safe as possible, at least inside my house. Verosika said. And out of your house? Vortex asked, wanting to know an answer. That's what you're for, the hellhound that is capable of defeating 14 armed men at the same time, she told him with a smile that was shared by Vortex. Hey, I guess so, that would work. Okay, let's get going then. And so, the next day came, and Isaac was clear to go. He looked up at Verosika as she entered the room, eyes sparkling brightly as he reached up for her with his tiny arms. The succubus giggled and reached down to scoop him up in her arms. Ah, you miss me? She cooed. She hadn't been gone too terribly long, but she didn't blame him for being antsy. She held the boy close, and let out a soft, aw, as he rested his tiny head against her shoulder. You are such a little cuddler. Isaac let out a squeak in response and nestled in even closer to his caretaker, who giggled and gently rubbed his head. So, are you ready to come and check out your new home? She asked. Isaac blinked, then pointed down at the ground before miming the actions of a man burning, eyes wide and flailing about in a rather adorably comedic manner. Verosika giggled. Yes, it is in hell, but it's not quite the kind of place you're probably expecting it to be. Suddenly, Verosika widened her eyes, realizing what she just said. Wait, how did you know where you and I are going? Verosika was shocked that Isaac knew they were going to hell, and angry with herself for confirming it. She watched as Isaac took a piece of paper, and began to write the answer. 'Cause you told me. You are the Red Angel, said you were succubus, succubuses come from hell, you gotta live in hell. Was the response he wrote. Verosika sighed and laughed softly to herself. I guess it was pretty obvious in hindsight, wasn't it? She sighed. Isaac nodded his head. She smiled. Well, I'm glad you're at peace with it. Come here. She reached over and gently scooped him out of the bed, holding him up to her shoulder and gently patting his back in a soothing manner. Without Verosika noticing, Isaac wasn't smiling, but rather he was frowning. He wasn't fully enjoying contact with her, but not because there was something wrong with her but with himself. Unbeknownst to the succubus, Isaac was having a conflagration inside of her. He could hear those voices full of hate and despair, whispering to him. Everything is a lie, you have nothing left. You don't deserve to be happy, your punishment will continue. She is lying to you, she will betray you, she will torture you. You know that's true, she's taking you to hell after all. Over and over again, he could hear them, sometimes a whisper, sometimes a thunderous scream. But those were not the only voices, others less aggressive, kinder but full of doubt, both his and others, filled his mind. That's not true, there is hope. Everything may be different, let's not give up. She's not evil, she's not like they told you. The devil may love, may be good. Isaac suddenly felt Verosika tense in his embrace and shudder. She closed her eyes and sighed softly, giving the boy a gentle squeeze. Isaac, I know you can hear the kind voices in your head, listen to them, and only them. They are the ones who are right. They're not as loud, but they are much stronger. She booped his nose. I can manipulate minds to a certain extent, and I can peek inside people's heads to get a sense for what they're feeling. That's what I just did with you. Does that make you uncomfortable? Some people find it a bit intrusive. Isaac looked at her, and nodded fearfully. Verosika then thought for a moment before replying kindly. So next time I'll ask you, okay? She asked, to which Isaac nodded with a tiny smile. Little did the boy know that everything Verosika told him was a lie half. As a succubus, Verosika naturally had the ability to feel and manipulate emotions directly and indirectly, being those of love, happiness and above all lust, with which she had the most affinity, in addition to also feeling intentions, but she definitely could not read thoughts, or hear what other people were thinking. Emotions like sadness, anger etc., although Verosika could also feel them, it was more subdued and lighter, and only if she decided to focus on her. Except for exceptional cases where these emotions come from beings with power and magic, whose emotions are manifested in an almost physical way, and therefore more intense, and can be felt from a distance. That's why Verosika shuddered and numbed, when she suddenly felt Isaac's emotions and thoughts. She was surprised, because she didn't expect to experience both impossible things at the same time when she hugged the boy. She had to use all of her willpower and clear her head in record time to keep from dropping the little boy to the ground, or crushing him in a powerful hug. She could then analyze in detail what she heard coming directly from Isaac's head, but for now she needed to comfort the boy and indicate what thoughts he should listen to. Great! Leaving that aside, I have to make something clear to you. I'm not taking you to hell with me because you deserve it, someone like you never deserves it, but I do it because I have no other alternative. Isaac looked at her confused, and she didn't need to see her mind to know why, so she thought for a moment about how to explain the situation to the boy. See, I was born in hell, it's where I'm supposed to be, and because of that I have to stay there most of the time, because if I don't, I could kinda make some really strong people really mad at me. She tried awkwardly. Isaac tilted his head to the side. She sighed. It's the law. She admitted. I stay up here too long, I could go to jail for the rest of my life. She chose not to mention the fact that they would probably just execute Isaac, but didn't say anything. Instead he began to make a quick drawing, which despite being simple, but understandable, in which you could see Verosika stuck in a cage, frowning and a tear running down her cheek. He then pointed to the drawing, asking if this was what she meant, to which Verosika nodded. Yes, exactly that, you understand now, she confirmed, which made Isaac look at the drawing. And if that happens, I couldn't be with you anymore, that's why I'm taking you there, not because you deserve it, but because I really don't have any other alternative. If it were up to me, you would go to live in the best and most appealing part of Sky, because that is what a appealing star like you deserves, she said while she kissed his head and hugged Isaac, who gasped and clapped his tiny hands over his mouth, tearing up when he heard those words. Verosika giggled softly and held him up against her shoulder so she could rest her cheek on the top of his tiny head and nuzzle it gently. Yep, that's right, you're a little star, she murmured softly. Isaac buried his face in the crook of her neck and began to quietly sob, the action only noticeable due to the way his shoulders rose and fell. Verosika had gotten very good at recognizing the child's body language. "Aw, Isaac, it's okay," she murmured softly. "Don't cry, this is a happy time," she felt Isaac nodding against her neck and she immediately understood. "Ah, are you crying because you're so happy, sweetie?" Another nod was his answer. Verosika just smiled at this, to see how happy him is to receive such a compliment like that. After a while, they prepared everything to leave, the first thing being Isaac's clothes. It was something simple but cute, brown pants, with red shoes and white socks, and a white shirt. Isaac looked down at the outfit he was given and let out a squeak of delight. He was finally wearing clothes again. He no longer felt cold and exposed. Verosika smiled sadly. It was nice to see the boy so happy, but she hated that something as simple as clothing could make him this happy. She sighed and gently picked him up. She would have held his hand and led him along, but the sad thing was that he was so tiny he simply couldn't reach to grab her hand. It was so easy for one to mistake the boy for a newborn baby the way he looked. She smiled and booped his nose lightly. "Wanna know what I'm looking forward to?" Isaac tilted his head. "Seeing you in those cute little pajama outfits I bought you and little Chad." Verosika was excited to see him and the little red one, in one of the animal pajamas. She got several, being the cats and dogs the main ones, given the boy's taste for them, but she also got some themed ones. Imps. Isaac surprisingly seemed quite confused and picked up a piece of paper to write on. "What is pajamas?" Verosika read this and was about to tell him when she stopped to think about it. "You know what? Let it be a surprise for later, for now we just need Vortex to arrive, to leave," she told Isaac. Suddenly she realized that little Chad was missing. "Isaac, where is little Chad?" Isaac looked at Verosika in confusion, before extending his small arm in front of hers. Poof, prie. And just like that, a small explosion of smoke, little Chad with glee. "Hello again little thing," Verosika greeted the little being stroking its head, to which the little red creature responded with her characteristic sound, liking the gesture. "Okay, Isaac and little Chad, I have something important, so listen carefully," Verosika announced, gaining their full attention. Once she checked this she continued. "I want you to do something important, and that is to be together as long as possible," she told them. Little Chad and Isaac looked at each other, and then at Verosika, who decided to explain why. "The reason why I want you to do this is because you're very young, and I can't always be by your side taking care of you, so I want you to be with him, with that ability that he has to heal. Without a doubt it's necessary to have him by your side," she said seriously but calmly. Seeing that neither of them answered, they listened carefully. "That's why, and the fact that the two of them look adorable together," she said, caressing both of their heads. He, prie, Isaac and little Chad laughed. "So, can you guys do that for me?" she asked. Isaac nodded. "Prie," exclaimed in an apparently affirmative way little Chad. "Very good, and Isaac, how many of these friends do you have?" Isaac considered for a moment and then shrugged, not knowing the answer, so Verosika asked. "Are there many, much more than 10? 20, she asked. Isaac thought for a moment how to respond, and then he grabbed a piece of paper and wrote something. Verosika looked at him and saw that the boy had not written a number, but only 2 words that made her eyes widen. "Wow, is this true?" Verosika asked, pointing to the paper, to which Isaac nodded. She asked all this to the boy, because she wanted them to be with Isaac at all times, when she was not with him, as well as little Chad, but she needed to know that she could do each one and how many they were. But seeing what Isaac put on the paper, it seemed that the plan was unfeasible, at least the way the succubus thought. "This is not possible, perhaps it's more than he can count," and that is why he wrote that, although she doubted that it was as large a number as the boy indicated directly. If they were more than the boy can count, then she would have to plan the situation better. Well, we'll deal with this topic later. For now you and little Chad stay together, and then we'll see who your other friends are. What do you think?" Isaac and little Chad nodded. "Okay, now let's finish fixing everything, and wait for Vortex to arrive." While they waited, she made sure they didn't leave anything in the room. It was the only thing left for her to do since all the other procedures, like getting the go-ahead from the doctors, had already been done and given, and in the end Isaac, the only thing he had, apart from his new clothes, were his drawings and drawing material, so organizing everything was easy. They heard the door of the room open, and recognized the bodyguard entering. Isaac greeted him with great joy, and stroked his head. "Hello to you too, little man," he said affectionately, before turning his gaze to Verosika. "Well, is everything ready? Can we go now?" the hellhound asked, and Verosika nodded. "Okay, let's go," he said as he watched Verosika pick up Isaac. They said goodbye to the medical staff, before leaving, and then got into the car. Vortex decided to just be the designated driver today, while Verosika sat with Isaac, holding little Chad in her arms, in the back. He knew that this was his day for both of them, and he didn't want to invade it. He also needed to concentrate since they weren't in the hospital anymore, so he couldn't be so relaxed, and he had to be more attentive to the dangers of the outside world. Only now, instead of it just being something he did for work, he now had a much more intense motivation. As he drove, he looked away when he could to see Isaac and Verosika. The boy's face filled with genuine astonishment at the world outside the car window, with his little red friend letting out his trademark little squeals with everything he and the boy saw. It had been so long since he had seen the outside world. He had spent so many days locked in his room while he was chained to a wall, plus years of fighting nightmares and monsters in the basement. So much so that he had almost forgotten what the outside looked like. It was so pretty. The car stopped and Isaac got out of the car with little Chad close to him. He could see that it was a pink and white store, with a sign made up of drawings of objects and letters, which the boy couldn't quite understand, but the mix of colors made it look very nice and striking. And it is that what he was seeing was an ice cream parlor. "So, Isaac, do you know what flavor you're going to want?" Verosika asked with a smile as they got out of the car. And in response Isaac just cocked his head in confusion. Verosika, seeing this, decided to be more specific. "Ice cream honey, what flavor of ice cream would you like?" she asked softly, but that did nothing to allay Isaac's confusion, who took the sketchpad from her and began to write. "Scream. Do your screams have different flavors?" Verosika blinked like an owl at that, then bit back a laugh at the innocent incongruity. No, it's not a scream, it's ice cream. It's like frozen milk, I guess, except it has a bunch of different flavors. Like vanilla chocolate. Strawberries pistachio, but I don't recommend pistachio or mint, for that matter, it tastes like medicine. I like mint. Vortex spoke. Ew, really? Your taste buds are broken, I'll pay the surgery fee to fix them. Verosika said with a grimace. Oh, it's an acquired taste, and it tastes better than it looks, give a chance. Tex said as he looked inside the ice cream parlor, making sure there was no problem. Once this was done, he opened the door for Isaac and Verosika to enter. The boy was quite amazed at how clean, bright and colorful everything was. It was so pretty, and made him smile. Verosika smirked, happy to see the boy acting like a boy. She knew that the ice cream parlor was a magical place for young children, but to see how captivated he was by the flavors on display was an extremely moving sight. She picked him up and hugged him, reading him the different flavors of ice cream to help him choose the flavor he wanted. A minute goes by, then 2, then 3, then 4. So, have you chosen which flavor you're going to want, Isaac? Verosika asked, somewhat surprised by the boy's indecision. But Isaac didn't seem to know which flavor to choose, he didn't even know how he should choose. Seeing this, Verosika decides to choose for him this time, since she seems to have no idea what he does. When the revelation hit her. He doesn't even know what to do, because he has never eaten ice cream, nor does he know what it is. This will be the first time he has eaten one. Seeing this, Verosika chose vanilla, an excellent flavor for how simple it was, for Isaac's first time eating ice cream. It was very much the gateway flavor. She pointed it out to him, and he nodded his head with a smile. She herself went with a strawberry frozen yogurt. She'd treat herself a bit, but she had to be conscious of her figure after all. Soon enough, she and Isaac sat down at one of the tables, each holding their respective cones. Verosika repressed her base instinct to lick her ice cream in the most stuck manner she possibly could, wanting to set a good example for the child. She watched him take his first lick, and saw the way his eyes lit up. Then Isaac gave little Chad a taste, who after licking the ice cream, let out a "pree" full of excitement and joy, while waving his floating hands. Verosika enjoyed the boy's face of emotion and happiness, seeing how he lit up for trying ice cream for the first time was wonderful. Until she saw what Isaac going to do, and remembered something that alarmed her. Isaac, wait. By then it was too late. Isaac had taken a big bite of his ice cream and swallowed it quickly. Booch. Isaac let out a groan of agony because he had his brain frozen. Verosika winced, and then pulled him in close, sitting him on her lap and gently rubbing his temples with her fingers, while little Chad looked at the boy with concern and hugged him. Sorry, sweetie, you can't take big bites like that, ice cream is meant to be eaten nice and slow. She said softly. Isaac squeaked in response and she giggled. It's okay, it wears off soon, don't worry. After a few moments, Isaac managed to recover. Do you feel better? Verosika asked gently, to which Isaac nodded. Fine, let me apologize to you, Verosika said, to which Isaac looked at her confused, because he didn't understand why she was apologizing, something that he succubus caught. I forgot that this was your first time eating ice cream, and I forgot to mention something so important, and you got hurt because of it. Isaac tilted his head, and she smirked and gently patted his tiny head. Isaac leaned into the touch like an affectionate cat, and she giggled. Ah, you're too cute to be sitting there all by yourself, Simir, come sit on my lap. She gathered him up in her arms and sat him down gently atop her lap as he continued to eat his ice cream. Verosika taught Isaac how to pace, while telling him about the rest of the flavors, as well as what toppings he could put on his ice cream. Isaac listened fascinated. While he ate his ice cream. So, tell me, do you want to add some of the toppings to your ice cream now? Or do you prefer to wait until the next time we come? Isaac thought about it, and in the end he shrugged his shoulders. Seeing this, Verosika responded calmly. Well, don't worry, let's go easy, for now enjoy your ice cream as it is. Do you like it, by the way? Verosika asked, to which Isaac nodded happily enthusiastically. Very good, she said with great joy to see the boy happy. She gave him a gentle squeeze and smiled warmly, and he nestled into her hold happily. She watched with a warm smile as she watched him eat his ice cream cone, taking a lick of hers every so often to make sure it didn't melt. Soon enough, they were finished with their cones. Verosika paid with her credit card, and then walked back out the door with Isaac held snugly in her arms. Uh-oh, looks like someone's got a little mess on their face. Verosika giggled before pulling a handkerchief from her skirt pocket and gently cleaning him off. Isaac smiled as he calmly allowed himself to be cleaned off. It felt nice to have someone fuss over him like this. He, Verosika, and Vortex were about to get in the car when. Howl. Huh. Vortex, did you just howl? Why? Verosika asked, looking at his bodyguard, hearing that powerful howl. She expected to see him with an excited face, only to see him confused. It wasn't me, boss. He spoke. Oh, come on, you're the only hellhound here, tell me, what made you so excited to do that? The succubus asked in disbelief. I'm telling the truth, it wasn't me. So, who was Dash? Verosika asked, looking around her and stopping her question when she saw that Isaac wasn't by her side. Isaac? With a growing sense of fear, she searched everywhere, but she couldn't find him, which only made things worse. Isaac. Isaac. She looked around for her, but she was nowhere to be seen. Boss, what's up? Vortex asked, concerned. It's Isaac, I can't find him, he said desperately, filling her voice, and continuing to search for him. What? What happened? How did you lose him? The hellhound asked, confused and also with a growing fear growing inside him, seeing that he couldn't find Isaac either. I didn't know, he was next to me and Dash. Prytherii. She stopped when she heard that characteristic sound, and directed her gaze to where the shriek came from. Wait, there it is. Verosika pointed out, seeing the boy at the entrance of a nearby alley, almost a block from where she and Vortex were, with little Chad. Isaac, she called out to the boy, wondering how in a matter of seconds, the boy got there so fast. But Isaac, instead of going with her, the boy stood at the mouth of the alley, watching with curiosity and analysis at the same time. Isaac! What are you doing? Come here. Verosika yelled, trying to get the boy's attention, but it was useless. Isaac just turned to look at Verosika and Vortex, and instead of going back to them, he just pointed to something in the alley that he had seen, and waved for them to come to his position before entering. Verosika tilted her head curiously, and took stock of the situation. Isaac didn't seem scared or anything, and there didn't seem to be any commotion in the alley. Did he find a kitten or something? She followed him to see what she was looking at, and she was shocked by what she saw. Sea cherubs? What are the cherubs doing here in the human world? She muttered to herself. Verosika saw, in what appeared to be an old rickety van, what were undoubtedly 3 cherubs, one resembling a child and 2 resembling lambs. Unexpected is an understatement to describe this, was Verosika's thought. The 3 little angels seemed to be arguing among themselves, without apparently having yet detected the boy who was a few steps away from them. Unaware of the new onlookers, they continued their discussion, and low enough that they were heard by anyone within the alley, but low enough that they were undetected from within. I still can't believe it. How could this happen to us? Exclaimed with sadness and anger the most aesthetically human cherub of all, who upon seeing him, brought a strange feeling. It wasn't our fault, and they still kicked us out, said the cherub lamb with yellow fur. Yes, but maybe not all is lost, maybe we have hope, at least we got a place to take refuge, said the blue and white sheep cherub. Colin, I know what you're trying to do, but now is not the time, said the childish-looking cherub named Colin. But I'm only trying to see the bright side. Cletus said this to the human cherub named Cletus. What bright side? We've been kicked out. There is no bright side, exclaimed with anger, but also pain, the yellow female cherub lamb to Colin. I know, Keenie. I just want it to hurt less somehow, that's all, Colin replied back, first with anger, but then with sadness. Verosika blinked at that. Kicked out. Kicked out of heaven. That was something that could happen. What had these 3 little cherubs done to get kicked out of their home? She idly thought to herself how completely doomed the princess' plans of rehabilitation were if heaven could just kick people out. No way anyone was staying clean for the rest of eternity. She blinked when she noticed Isaac approaching them. Isaac, she called out uncertainly. Isaac turned to look back at her, head tilted to the side curiously. Be careful around strangers, sweetie, see mirror. She gathered the boy up in her arms. Isaac squeaked in mild protest, gesturing to the 3 cherubs before clasping his hands together and giving Verosika a pleading expression, unintentionally giving her the single cutest facial expression she had ever seen in her entire life. Verosika could hardly resist that look, so she had to use all her willpower to do it, and taking advantage of the fact that the cherubs didn't notice them, she hid with Isaac in her arms, behind a nearby container together and signaled to Vortex to come. For him to do the same. Are my nose and my eyes deceiving me? Or are they cherubs? Vortex asked Verosika in a low voice. No, your sense of smell and vision are fine, those are real cherubs, and apparently banished from heaven, Verosika replied to the disguised hellhound. But how? What did they do? How am I supposed to know? I know as much as you do right now. Verosika said. Perhaps they're bloodthirsty psychopaths. PFFF, do they really look like bloodthirsty psychopaths to you? Have you seen them? Asked Vortex incredulously. Vortex, I think that neither you nor I should trust appearances at this point, much less something that came from heaven, or do I have to remind you what it looked like and who healed your eye? She looked at him, embodying an eyebrow. Okay, fair point, he admitted, a little embarrassed. We don't know what they can or can't do, so we just have to watch them. Vortex looked like he was going to say something else, but instead he put on a confused look and asked. Hey boss, where did you get that horrible doll from? And why are you hugging it? Verosika didn't understand what he meant, until she looked into his arms, and almost screamed in fright. Instead of Isaac and little Chad, there was some kind of rag doll, or what used to be a very ugly hand-stitched rag doll, with just a head and a body that reminded her of a ghost. Though it wasn't the ugliness of the doll that almost made her scream, but the fact that suddenly, she realized that Isaac wasn't in her arms, and in her place was that thing. Still, that didn't stop her from letting go of the rag doll, only for her and Vortex to be surprised to see the doll floating in the air. And once the surprise of this event had passed, she found herself in the same situation as before, looking for Isaac, only in this case she found him quickly, heading towards where the cherubs were, with her red companion in his arms. The boy walked calmly, and the purple one seemed to be the first to notice him. He tensed a bit, then perked up and waved, a forced smile on his face. "Oh, hey kid, sorry, it's not really a good time, we're like having an argument." "Ugh. Colin, don't worry. This child could be lost, separated from his mother. We should try to help him." The woman spoke. "Wait a second, something's not right here." The childish spoke, looking at Isaac closely, and suddenly his eyes widened in surprise. This is not possible. Am I going crazy?" Cletus exclaimed in disbelief, before turning to his fallen companions. "You too feel that, don't you?" Keeney and Colin, upon hearing what the Puto said, decided to do the same, and analyze the boy in detail, getting the same surprise as the childish-looking cherub. "No, I'm sorry too, his soul is both demonic and angelic. But definitely from Earth too, all at the same time." The woman seemed confused and could not be like the rest of her companions. The three cherubs looked at the boy with surprise, apprehension, and some fear. Colin sighed. "Listen, buddy, we don't know exactly what's going on or what you want, but we really don't want any more trouble with the guys down there, okay?" he said with a tone that combined calm and pleading. The more childish-looking cherub then exclaimed, with a tone that mixed sadness and anger in a dim but clear way. "We just had 3 demons ruin our lives." For his part, Isaac could only tilt his head in confusion. Since they left the ice cream shop, one of their items had been activated. Tooth of the dog indicated that there was something important, but hidden nearby, and his compass indicated where it was, which was right in an alley relatively close to where he was. And luckily, since he didn't have to use his bombs to blow up all the walls, to find him, as he did in the basement, at least on this occasion. And really Isaac did not know that he was going to find a hidden secret in the city, nor that he could find it in the city. So, he was greatly surprised to find 3 unique-looking angels, because one looked like a child like him, and the other 2 were lambs, which were the same height, talking to each other. He didn't quite understand what they were talking about, but given their appearance, and the mood they had, it seemed that they had had a bad day, something that made Isaac feel a little sad. Although he didn't fully understand what they were talking about, what he could understand was that the most human-looking one was called Cletus, the boy blue and white lamb was Colin and the girl yellow lamb was Keeney. He tried to face himself the first time to hear better, but his mother grabbed him, and despite the fact that he tried to plead with her eyes, she resisted and hid together with Mr. Vortex behind a garbage container. Isaac was now more confused than before. Why was she acting like that? Were those 3 dangerous? Well, Verosika may have been a demon, but she hadn't done anything wrong. Instead, she saved him, and she's been nothing but nice to him, same to Vortex. So why should they be afraid of angels? Also, because they didn't allow him to get close to them, she kept him in such a firm grip, but without hurting him, that the boy had to use stitches to get out. Why was she afraid that Isaac would get hurt? No, they seemed to be dangerous to him. Of course, it wasn't the first time that Isaac dealt with angels who wanted to kill and harm him. But those were the angels of the angel room, and unless the boy attacked them with a bomb, they didn't attack him back. There were also those FTS with wings that looked like angels, that Isaac found in the basement rooms, especially in the cathedral, that were directly hostile, but Isaac doubted that those were real angels. In addition, Isaac had many familiars and friends, who were angels, who helped him and accompanied him, so there should be no danger. It is clear that these angels here were not similar to the ones he found in the basement. To begin with, they had faces, clothes, they spoke, and two of them looked like lambs. It must be because they were from the city and here the angels were different. It wasn't clear to Isaac, but everything pointed to it, but still Isaac wanted to talk, or rather write, to them. The boy supposed that if he didn't attack them first, they wouldn't have reason to attack him or fear him, right? Well, Isaac seems to have been right, at least in part, since they didn't attack him as soon as they saw him, and from what he understood to say to Kini, they wanted to help him, because he thought he was lost, and was looking for his mother. Isaac frowned at this, remembering his mother. He really did not want to find her, she would kill him if she saw him again. But before being able to communicate that to them, the one with the most human aspect, Cletus, if Isaac was not mistaken, looked at him carefully, analyzing with his eyes. The boy wondered if there was something on his face, before seeing how the angel acted more and more surprised. As a pretender, both he and the other angels began to get scared, which also alerted Isaac a bit, and he feared that they would attack him, for some reason that the boy did not know, but the three seemed more scared, and wanted to avoid any conflict, so they told Isaac. And the boy couldn't understand why they acted like that. They said something about angelic, demonic and earth, which Isaac could not understand. Maybe they are referring to his item, Terra. He is not sure. Isaac looked at Verosika and returned to her, who picked him up in her arms. The boy pointed to where the cherubs were, with a look full of confusion. Although there were no words, Verosika managed to interpret as, "What's wrong with them?" She let out a sigh. "Isaac, those three, they could really hurt me and Vortex if they have holy weapons." Hearing this, Isaac's eyes widened in terror, and he wrote quickly. "Hurt you? But why? You haven't done anything wrong." Although Verosika had already confirmed to Isaac what he suspected, that he was afraid that he would hurt her, but Verosika had been good all this time, they had no reason to hurt her. He wrote that last thought, and Verosika read it. She winced and avoided talking about how she did compromise things, to put it very mildly, and decided to go another route, which was still the truth. "I know, but I don't want to take any chances." Isaac frowned and pointed in the direction of the angels, then drew a cross over where his heart was. Understanding the message, Verosika was conflicted. "I know they're clearly in pain, but okay, I'll talk to them just from a reasonable distance." She turned to Vortex, but Verosika didn't need to say anything, when the disguised hellhound interrupted her, as he took Isaac from her and carried him in his arms. "You don't need to say a word, boss, I've got your back if something goes wrong," he said with a smile. Verosika smiled back, then she took a deep breath before going to the alley where the cherubs were. Now how to start this conversation, that was the question that was on Verosika's mind. Wait, they said that 3 demons ruined their lives, she said in her mind. Maybe that wouldn't be too much of a coincidence. The cherubs, who had been watching Verosika ever since Isaac came to her. They looked at her expectantly and distrustful, since they knew it was really her. "Excuse me, I couldn't help but overhear what you were saying to Isaac here. Her lives were ruined by 3 demons, right?" Verosika asked, to make sure she had the information straight. "Yes, 3 of your kind," said with venom and anger in her voice the yellow cherub lamb. Verosika remained calm, although on another occasion she would have responded with the same aggressiveness, or a "F you," to the cherub, but given the situation, she wanted answers, that Isaac wanted to help them, and that he was also observing everything. She knew she would contain for now. "Okay, those 3 weren't imps by any chance, were they? And one of them is taller than the other 2, narrow pointy face, black striped horns, white spot around his eye, and that voice, that makes you want to nail yourself scissors in the ears." Hearing this, all 3 widened their eyes in surprise, glancing at each other briefly before the childlike cherub stepped forward, or the equivalent for someone who floats. "Yeah, how did you know? Do you know them?" he asked suspiciously. At this, it was Verosika's turn to make a face of pure disgust. "Yes, unfortunately I know them, at least I know their boss very well," she said with contempt and disgust in her voice. Seeing this unexpected reaction on her part, the 3 cherubs were even more surprised, and their dislike for Verosika decreased, and was replaced by confusion. And exactly how do you know him? Colin asked Verosika, who with even more anger and disgust. I met that son of a dash. Suddenly she stopped, and turned her gaze to where Isaac was, who was looking and apparently listening to everything, so she then turned to the cherubs, inhaled and exhaled to calm down, and responded again, this time visibly calmer, but still very upset. Look, I can't go into details, without saying a lot of profanity and words that I really don't want Isaac to hear, so for now I will tell you that he is my ex. It is also the worst mistake and misfortune of my life and from anyone's life really, she said, she replied. The three little angels looked at each other and then at her with bowed heads. Verosika sighed. On the one hand she wanted to omit that story, at least until later, when Isaac was not present, and it would be easier for her to tell it, without containing the tide of swears, which used to come out of the succubus's mouth, every time she told it in detail. But on the other hand, Verosika wanted to know how these three ended up getting F by her ex, and how she managed to get the three expelled from heaven, plus Isaac wanted to help them. So, she prepared to tell them more in detail about the situation. That guy stole my credit card and abandoned me in my hotel room, then spent thousands of dollars from my bank account on horse riding lessons, forced me to chase him, covered me in mud, publicly humiliated me and she clenched her fists. It was an effort for Verosika not to unleash a tide of insults towards the imp, and this was the best way to restrain herself from doing it. He makes everyone's life worse when he gets involved with them, and he doesn't even give a reason why he is the way he is. He's always hiding things from others and he puts me up against the wall. If you're going to hurt my life, my funds, and my reputation, at least give me the decency to explain why. She closed her eyes and took a breath. Sorry, I'm so frustrated with him and it's really hard not to swear. So what did the idiot do to you guys? Cletus puffed out her chest. We came here to convince a man that suicide wasn't the answer, and those three cretins came up and sabotaged our work every time by taking everything good in the word and turning it all upside down. Why did they want him to kill himself so badly? Colin twisted his hooves nervously. Because his business is killing people on Earth and he was probably too lazy to pull the trigger himself, Verosika sneered, her eyes narrowing as she frowned. He has no right to come here and take people's lives and deny them his choice. Keeney said, outraged. TCH, that's not even the worst part. One of his policies is, kids die free. I literally wanted to wring his skinny little pencil neck when I saw that. Verosika nearly snarled, maintaining her composure as best he could to avoid scaring Isaac. Although before she couldn't care less about children, and by extension that IMP policy, now that she had Isaac in her life, and knowing all that he suffered, made for Verosika the idea of seeing an innocent child being hurt, her BLD boiled. And that her ex, one of the people Mayday hates the most, murdered children for free, made her whole being filled with a murderous rage. Especially if said child was Isaac, the mere idea that Blitzo would kill the boy, was something she hadn't thought clearly until now, turned her stomach into a mixture of fear, disgust, and rage. And seeing the faces of the three cherubs, it seemed that the feeling for the idea was mutual. The faces of the three angelic beings were distorted by a mixture of shock, horror and anger, at different levels of intensity for each cherub, from what Verosika had told them. That son of a biscuit eater. Eep, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to use such strong language, Keeney spoke, and Verosika snorted into her hand. Oh, I can think of some stronger things to say about him, but I know how you angel types are about naughty words, and I want to be a good example for the little one, so I'll restrain myself for the time being. Cletus tilted his head. Huh. Well. That's awfully strange. I mean, you're one of those succubus types, aren't ya? Kind of figured being a bad influence is what you're all about, no offense. Verosika snickered. You're not wrong, but we prefer to keep that sort of thing to adults, thank you very much. After saying that, Verosika paused, and pondered for a bit. Okay, to be honest, not many care what happens or doesn't happen with children, even if it's their own children, but there are many who do, including me. She answered. The three cherubs looked at each other, confused but more impressed by the unexpected behavior of the succubus. At first, they thought that it would be the same as those imps that ruined her life, but since they started talking to her, everything they have been learning up to now, both about her and the underworld, as well as those 3 imps, has been one revelation after another. By this point the image they had of hell and its inhabitants was beginning to be no longer as clear as before. Of course, they suspected that the disguised succubus could be lying, but for the moment, none of the 3 fallen angels saw what benefit she would have with that, besides that her attitude and behaviors had been genuine until now. If she was trying to deceive them in any way, they didn't have any proof at the moment, so they decided that continuing to chat would be the right thing to do. After saying that, she thought for a moment before asking. Come to think of it, you guys mentioned getting kicked out of heaven and my idiot ex was involved. How did he manage to ruin you guys like that? Verosika asked, wanting to know how Blitzo managed to fail not 1 but 3 cherubs. Well, it was we wanted Lyle to live, they wanted him to die, we tried to show him the beauty of life, they turned it into something terrible, and then we kind of lost our temper with them, a little, Colin said quietly. It got out of control, tried to shoot them with our bows, Cletus grimaced. And then we accidentally shot a string, and that sent a piano flying, and it crushed Lyle to death, Keeney said with a sigh. And the old feather dusters upstairs were stricter than they should have been. Verosika nodded. Don't refer to them like that. Kenny replied before pausing, but yeah, that happened. For Verosika, the information they gave her made no sense, although the death of this Kyle was something bad, and technically it was the fault of the 3 of them, in reality the real culprit was Blitzo's idiot and his group. Wait, what you told me it doesn't add up. Verosika told them, drawing the attention of all 3. But it's the truth. Cletus exclaimed, somewhat indignant that she insinuated that they were lying. He may have fallen, but that did not make him or his companions liars. Yes, and it's because it's true, it doesn't make sense, she responded, greatly confusing them, to which the succubus proceeded to explain. Okay, if you failed to prevent the death of this guy Kyle, and yes, that was technically your fault, but kicking someone out of heaven on a technicality, that's what doesn't add up to me, she answered the cherubim, and without waiting for an answer she continued. Was it a direct order from God? We wish it had been a direct order from God, it would have been an honor, although since we failed, it's a good thing it wasn't the case since we would have failed him. Cletus said excitedly, only to be saddened by the memory of his failure, and fearful as he wondered what his punishment would have been in that case. Seeing him like this, Verosika shuddered a little, for some reason, seeing the most human of the 3 cherubs scared and then sad, was unpleasantly familiar, but she decided to continue asking. Then there must be something else, were you secretly plotting something against heaven? Did you traffic in angelic weapons and artifacts? Did you plan an attack against God? Or was it a direct order from God? Verosika asked. No. 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 We would never do anything like that. What makes you think that? Keeney asked between angry and surprised that the succubus theorized all that. Calm down, I'm asking because from what you've told me so far, being punished for a technicality is low, very low, something I thought only happened on earth and hell, and it costs me a little to assimilate that. Let's see, I've hated heaven and its inhabitants, like most in hell, but even so I thought that heaven itself would be much better than that, that's why I ask if you did something else, why, which is cruel and senseless. It's as if they had been wanting to get you 3 out of heaven for a long time, and they took the first opportunity that presented itself to expel you. The 3 of them looked at each other quite surprised by the succubus's reasoning. They hadn't really stopped to think about it that way, but now that they had thought about it in detail, her words made some sense. Especially for Cletus, because he had the idea of creating CHRUB. He always received strong opposition from those around them. Although the inhabitants of heaven were not explicitly prohibited from interfering with earthly affairs, and it had been done on more than one occasion, it was something frowned upon to do so, except in a few cases. Cletus, since he was young, always wanted to help and do good, like any other angel, but heaven was the paradise, so there were really no serious problems. Then the idea of helping mortals occurred to him. He had seen what life was like on earth, so he created an organization, based on regularly helping mortals, at the request of souls in heaven. It was in theory something that should exist even before he was born. The land had many problems, although it was true that things had improved for a while, there was still a lot to do. And if divine intervention could help resolve sayings, why not do it? Actually, neither of his two companions received an answer when they presented the idea for the first time to the high command of the cherubs. At first opposition to the idea was passive, but as Cletus persisted, passive aggressiveness became the norm, even after he created the organization on his own. Cletus, Keeney, and Colin were never given a valid reason why, having the resources to help, heaven never did anything, except in rare exceptions. And it seemed that by wanting to help them, and getting down to work, going beyond words and good wishes, to do something genuine, they too were unworthy and despicable. They never thought about that in detail until now, but the signs were there. They were subtle, Deary being the biggest example of all, given how excited she was when she announced her expulsion. Although deep down she didn't know if it was that, or the fact that she wanted to keep what Cletus and her group had created. Although the latter was unlikely, given how the people of heaven had reacted and had treated them all this time, for the idea of helping the people of earth, using the resources and tools of heaven. Cletus, Colin and Keeney thought about it, and the more they did it the more they realized it. All the passive aggressiveness, or outright rejection, of the idea, but not only their companions, but their own families, who in the best of cases, treated everything as a passing stage. Colin buried his face in his hooves and began to cry. Keeney also began to cry. And Cletus? Well, he fell to his knees, his expression completely broken. They don't care about the people down here, they never cared about them, he breathed. Is heaven still the same? What a novelty. Verosika had to feel bad for the poor things for that. It seemed like they really wanted to make a difference, to do genuine good for the human race, but they were oppressed by the people floating above them to the point where that became impossible. Seeing the three of them broken like this, with sadness emanating from them, for having been punished so terribly, just for wanting to make this world a better place, and the whole situation, was something that broke her heart, especially when she saw Cletus beginning to cry like a small child. And she finally understood why it hurt her in a special way to see Cletus like this, why the childish aspect cherub reminded her a lot of Isaac in appearance, and now also in story. Verosika and Vortex stepped forward, the former ready to give the three cherubs a hug, the latter to offer comfort to them, but Isaac beat them both. Cletus felt that someone almost his height, and he was surprised to see the boy from before, Isaac if he did not remember, that with tears running down his face, he hugged him, in a clear attempt to comfort him, and he was not only hugging him, but he was humming a song that Cletus or his companions didn't know, but seemed to sound pretty good. And even more surprising, when the boy saw that Cletus wasn't crying anymore, he proceeded to do the same with Keeney and Colin, who were just as surprised as Cletus by the acts. Surprised and very moved. Although not as much as Verosika and Vortex, they were surprised and moved by the boy's act. But of the two, Verosika was the one who felt the most surprised and moved, especially when Isaac began to hum. She knew that song, and it was the same one that she sang to him the first time. Seeing that Isaac used her to ease someone else's pain, Verosika simply melted her heart, and made her cry with joy, knowing that she was the one who inspired him to do something so appealing for someone. Isaac didn't know much about what was going on, and he didn't understand much of what Verosika and the three angel children were talking about. But from what he knew is that the three angels failed to protect someone's life, because of three demons, and it seemed that Verosika knew one of those three, and she didn't like him very much. Although Isaac couldn't fully understand why, it seems that that demon did a lot of bad things to her. But what he did understand, and it impacted him, is that for failing, heaven punished the three of them and expelled them. Isaac was very shocked by that. The only other angel he knew was Satan, and that was because he was evil and had defied God or something similar. It was not clear to him. At first, he believed that it was for failing that they had been expelled. Verosika had asked if protecting this Kyle was a direct order from God, to which the three angels denied it. Then Verosika asked something else, and proposed that heaven did not like that they helped the people of earth, and they did not believe in the goal of the three angel children. For which they were punished, for wanting to do good to the people here, that is why heaven and God left them aside. And that's what made him start crying, because he knew what that felt like, being disowned, abandoned and punished by God and his family. Seeing the cherub, who looked the most like a child, fall to the ground on his knees and begin to cry, a memory came to the child's mind. When he was trapped in the basement, Isaac would sometimes come to an area called Downpour, where there was a mirror, in which he saw himself many times. And seeing the angel child fall to his knees and cry, full of pain, sadness and dirt, he saw himself as many times he saw himself in the mirror of Downpour. So, he started to cry when he remembered that, but he felt that he had to do something else. He wanted to help him, to make him feel better. Then he remembered everything that Verosika did for him, every time he was scared or sad, especially the songs that he used to sing to her, the first one being the most special. So it made sense for him to use it so the angels would stop being sad. And it had worked, given how they were all holding each other at the moment. For their part, Cletus, Colin, and Keeney were still quite shocked by the whole situation. They really didn't expect what seemed to be a hybrid, a succubus and a hellhound to not only understand their situation, but to comfort them. It was so surreal, they had to pinch themselves to know they weren't dreaming. Keeney was the first one to pull herself together, as her two co-workers continued to sob miserably. Thanks for this. I never expected that demons would want to help us, she said softly. Verosika smirked and nodded her head. Hey, you're a victim of those control freaks, and the concept of the misfortune made flesh that is my ex, that means you're a friend of mine. Nothing gets under my skin more than people who float above everyone else and drag the working class down, or that they are a victim of blitzo. She let out a sigh and shook her head. In a way, you're lucky. Kicking you out is all they can get away with up there. There's some guys down in hell that'll do so much worse than that if you cross them. What do you mean exactly? Colin asked, having recovered. Verosika, while making a face, recalled some stories of how the mafias, in particular the Ring of Greed, made those who failed, or those who wanted to get out of their way in one way or another. Trust me, you don't want to know the details, nor is it necessary. She paused before continuing. I will only tell you that many like the mafias, especially those of the Ring of Greed, do not care if you are family or not. If you are a nuisance, even if you have the most altruistic intentions, they will get rid of you. Verosika sighed sadly as she began to remember. I still remember the story I heard a few years ago, of a mother who wanted to protect her son from that world. She was an imp, but they said she was a sweet, kind and charming woman, but she was also the wife of the leader of the mafia. I don't remember the names, but I do remember that he didn't care that this woman was his wife, or the mother of his child. Verosika sighed because it was difficult for her to tell that story. And one day she was no more, she was never seen again. I don't know what her husband did to her, but I just hope that at least being his wife, it was quick and painless. The story ended. This was a story that she had heard many years ago, and though Verosika didn't pay much attention to it, she didn't give it much value. Although to be fair it was from people she didn't know, and that might be a vile lie, since there's no such thing as a good father or mother in hell. At least she's never met one. She couldn't help but feel some sympathy for the nameless imp. She recalled that story, digging it up from the depths of her memories. And now that she had Isaac in her life, after everything she had lived through and learned, that story hit her in a very different and very hard way, because now that Verosika knows that these things really happen, and what it is to have a son around you want to protect, I might empathize with that nameless imp mother. And her son? Asked Cletus, who stopped being hugged by Isaac, but was still holding his hand, and looking at Verosika like the child, attentive to the story she was telling. Verosika thought for a moment, trying to remember something about the boy, but she couldn't really remember any details. I don't remember exactly, but what he lived through, although under the command of his father, but I'm not sure what happened to him afterwards, she said, trying to remember. And how do you know that story, boss? Vortex asked, genuinely curious as to how she found out about that story. From a very old ex of mine, according to work with the family, but I don't really remember beyond what I told. She snorted and crossed her arms over her bust. He was a scumbag anyway, and he was also way too big for his britches. She would never forget how terrible Chaz was in bed. It took a lot to make a succubus actively not want to partake in lewd acts with you. She exhaled through her nostrils and shrugged her shoulders. But yeah, no matter how bad it is up there, it could always be worse. Just try and remember that, she said softly. Cletus, Keeney, and Colin all exchanged glances, frowning sadly. There has to be some good down there though, right? I mean you guys are awesome, Colin admitted softly. Verosika beamed at that. Heh. Thanks, glad you feel that way. You want to see good in hell, you should meet the princess. Upon hearing this, the cherubs opened their eyes in shock. Wait, princess? Like the princess of hell? Lucifer's daughter? Did Lucifer have a daughter? Colin asks, confused. Yes, herself. But I don't understand, what do you have to do with her? Isn't she supposed to be the epitome of evil, cruelty, SDSM or something like that? Keeney asked, as confused as her and Isaac's classmates. That confusion only increased when Verosika and Vortex started laughing. She. Ha. 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 Oh, Charlie being the epitome of evil, HA. Lucifer wishes Charlie was at least half of that, Verosika said, wiping away a tear. What exactly are you talking about? Isn't she supposed to be evil? Asks Cletus, trying to rack his brains, because not only did they not just find out that Lucifer had offspring, but apparently Verosika suggested that she was not evil. Evil? Yeah, right, the closest thing to evil she's ever been known to do, being bisexual, having a girlfriend, and beating up a horrible, disgusting woman, who anchors the news, Vortex said in quotes. And none of that is considered a bad thing for the banners of hell and earth in present times. Hell, the latter can even be considered something positive. Katie is a despicable being, who has been deserving of a beating for a long time, Verosika said happily, remembering how the princess gave Katie Killjoy a beating without barely ruffling her hair. That day the succubus was happy to see on television how that be received what she deserved. But putting that aside, she's a sweet and charming person, albeit quite naive, given the project she started. Verosika continued to recall the Princess Project, and while she scoffed at the idea almost as much as anyone else, she now saw the Princess Project in a better light. It's a shame that given what Verosika learned with the whole cherub thing, that project is apparently doomed to fail. What project exactly? Cletus asked to see that he was planning the supposed Antichrist. Oh, it's a hotel to redeem sinners, called the Hazbinhotel. Wait, wasn't that Happy Hotel? Asked Vortex. Yes, but I think they changed it at the last minute, Verosika said, not very sure. But isn't she supposed to be the Antichrist? Excuse me, but it's hard to believe that the daughter of the King of Hell, who is supposed to be the opposite of Christ, is really what you say, Colin said, not being able to believe everything what Verosika was saying about Charlie. Yes, and Lucifer was the son of God, and you see how all that ended, Verosika said, rolling her eyes. Touch, Colin said upon hearing that. It is said, touché, also a piece of advice, do not mention the name of Christ to someone from hell. Why? Just the mention of his name fills you with fear? Keeney asked. No. His name fills some of them with a homicidal rage, especially when it comes to the sinners who committed all kinds of heinous acts in his name, or lived a life of oppression and repression, denying themselves all kinds of pleasure and happiness, because they were made to believe that they would win heaven that way, only for the majority to end up in hell. The greatest scam of humanity is how this whole matter is known. Ouch, is the only thing Cletus and Keeney could think, hearing what Verosika said, while they could feel Isaac's hand squeeze theirs. Thank you, little one, Cletus and Keeney spoke, sincerely thanking Isaac for the support he gave them. After all the three of them had been through, there may be a soul like Isaac, willing to support them even when they barely knew him. Even more so when his soul was a strange fusion of angelic, demonic and earthly. They would have to ask the succubus for an explanation regarding this issue. But before either of them could ask, something else happened. Aya, all three exclaimed in pain at the same time. This caught the attention of the human and the two demons, all to look at the three angels, and they could see something that was happening to them. The light that covered them, as well as that of their halos, began to flicker, as if they were damaged bulbs. While they could only let out moans of pain, with Colin, being the only one who was flying, suddenly landing on the ground, while Kini and Cletus fell to their knees, it seemed that the pain was such that they could barely stand up. What's wrong with you guys?" Verosika asked, unsure of what she was seeing, but alarmed by the three of them, with Isaac looking in horror at the scene and then at the succubus and the hellhound, in search of an answer, which none. They lasted like this for a few moments, before returning to normal, with the three of them floating in the air again, or at least they tried to before falling softly on the floor, looking somewhat exhausted but standing. Cletus was the one who was the first to recover, and give an answer. "It's the light of heaven, from what I read, when an angel falls or is expelled, he or she loses their connection to heaven, and over time to the holy light, and thus their powers. It's painful, and when they eventually completely lose connection, Cletus tried to explain but had a hard time saying the next part, because it filled him with great fear. "One of two, either we will die, which would be the most probable, or we will become demons, which would be a death sentence." Colin finished, sharing the same level of fear and horror as Cletus and Kini. "And as when it remains for that to happen?" Verosika asked, worried about the three of them. "We don't know, but it's getting more and more frequent, so we might have a week at most before she couldn't finish the sentence, just crying. After all, being expelled was already bad, but knowing that they were going to become demons or die, neither option sounded good. But being a devil isn't that bad, at least not if you know the right people. He tried to comfort Verosika only to have a sobbing Cletus answer him. "Don't you understand? If we become demons, then the exterminators will come for us, with more enthusiasm than for any other. There will be no place where we can hide from them. Becoming a demon for someone from heaven is a literal death sentence," said the cherub. This horrified Verosika and Vortex to a great extent, but especially Isaac. Isaac shook his head from side to side rapidly, refusing to accept that. He grabbed Cletus by the hands and started trying to pull him along with him. Cletus was confused, but Verosika caught on to what Isaac was trying to do. She smirked. Well, it seems Isaac's decided that you're gonna come and stay with us," she said simply. The three former cherubs looked at her with wide eyes. Wait, just like that? You'll just take us in?" Colin exclaimed in sheer disbelief. "You just met us, you're already helping us this much?" Kini asked. Verosika shrugged her shoulders. "Sure, there's a ton of bad eggs down there, but we're not all a bunch of scumbags. Just like how not all you little feather dusters are a bunch of stuck-up, pompous abusers of power." The three angels were moved and impressed beyond all measure by the acts of these three, more than all by the acts of Isaac and Verosika's proposal. "We're really grateful, but we have to decline the offer," Colin said. "That because?" asks an incredulous Verosika. "Is it because we're demons?" "Dude, if that's it, we assure you that we don't have any macabre plan or anything. No, it's not that, it's just that if they do that, when we finally turn, we'll become a target." Colin began to explain. "And it might be a little reckless to say this, when we barely know each other, but if their words are genuine, they would be a good person who would be in grave danger," Kini explained heavily. "And we can't let someone like you put yourself in danger for us. That would be the opposite of why we created CHRUB, it wouldn't be right," Cletus said, sharing the sentiment. "And how are you so sure that in the end that's what will happen? Do you have any proof? Beyond what they read and what they told you?" Verosika asked. Hearing this, the cherubs hesitated a bit, and Cletus responded. "We really don't have proof, but we can't risk it, when our light goes out, and we lose all that we have left of sacred magic. If we don't die, then they will be with the exorcists knocking on the doors sooner or later, and we don't want anything to happen to you or the little one." Verosika knew that they had reached an impasse, although what they told the three in heaven could be a lie. If it turns out to be true, she, Isaac and everyone else would be in great danger. She was going to say something, until she felt someone pull her shirt. Huh. She looked down, and saw that Isaac wanted to show her something, that he had written something in her notebook. I have an idea to help them, but I need a bigger place. Verosika looked at what Isaac wrote. Honey, what do you mean? Asked the succubus. I know how to help them, but I need a bigger place. This is very small, Isaac wrote again. It took her a while to understand how Isaac would help the three, but soon Verosika's mind clicked, and she realized that he, like him, could help them. Or well, at least he had more or less an idea, using his items. Verosika wanted to ask a lot of things, the main one being how she would use her items, and why she needs a bigger space, but decided that he would find out as he went. Okay, listen, there's a solution I think, she announced herself, calling everyone's attention. Wait, solution? Which one? Kini asked. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 3. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and Gamer95 on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.